Hello, everyone. My name is Juan. I'm a college student. I am a civic engagement intern with the Alliance this fall. And today I have the pleasure of presenting to you all Voting 101. It's a presentation that I compiled with the latest information on voting, about electoral dates, all the 101 information that you need, and essentially just a bunch of reminders to help you guys out as much as I can in the Harris County, Houston area, and Texas about voting in our general elections in 2020, and essentially everything you need to know about all the processes. Other than that, I want to present to you all an agenda about this overall presentation. So first, I am introducing myself and welcoming you to the presentation. Secondly, for some of our viewers tuning in that are not necessarily convinced about voting, I want to dedicate the first part of this presentation to you all. And essentially, I named it Why Vote? And I will talk about essentially the statistics and some of the potential reasons why you should vote and you should consider voting for this upcoming election if you haven't yet. And third, I'm going to be talking about key dates for the November 3rd election. Fourth, if you haven't registered to vote, I will talk about all the step-to-step details about registering to vote and how to make it as easy and as convenient as possible for you. Fifth, what will be on the ballot this upcoming election? So I'll be talking about one of the most prominent positions that you'll be voting for. And we all know that the presidential election is probably the most important one. Sixth, we're going to be talking about voting by mail if you qualify and if you choose to do that. Seventh, we're going to be talking about drive-through and curbside voting. Drive-through voting is a new implemented way of voting because of COVID-19, and curbside voting is a slight distinction from that. Eighth, we're going to be talking about early voting information. So essentially all the information that you need to essentially know how to vote before the November 3rd deadline. Ninth, we're just going to end the presentation with election day reminders to essentially help you out, register to vote, and make sure that everything is online for you to actually vote. Alrighty, let's begin. So why vote? So for our friends that are not yet convinced about voting or that need a little bit of motivation about stepping up to vote, I want to present to you all with a couple of statistics. So in Texas, voter turnout for the 2016 general election was 51.6%, compared to Minnesota at 74.8%. So most recently, nearly 25% of registered voters voted in the 2020 primary elections in July. In previous years, Texas has been ranked between 46th to 49% in voter turnout out of all 50 states. Now, I want to talk about all these three different statistics and essentially give you a general perspective as to why this is important. Okay, so first, to the first point, voter turnout for the 2016 general elections was 51.6%. Now, let's just think about this and put it into perspective. For the general election, as you get to find out, you're not just voting for the president. You're voting for Texas senators, you're voting for Texas representatives, you're voting for Texas state senators, state representatives, you're also voting for other positions. And if a voter turnout highlights 51.6% of your total registered voter population going out to vote, what this means is that those representatives, those senators, only represent that 51.6% category. Now, they may not necessarily only represent that, but at least 51.6% made a decision for the other percentage that did not vote. So this is important because in a democracy, voting is arguably one of the most important ways, one of the most impactful ways to get people to get their voices heard in a legitimate and strong way. So compared to Minnesota at 74.8%, even though Minnesota did not have a voter turnout of 100%, Minnesota was the highest had the highest voter turnout rate in 2016, and it meant that if anything, compared to all other states, the government of Minnesota and every single decision made as a result of that was more representative and more in line of what the people meant. So going to the third bullet point, Because of these statistics, Texas has actually ranked between 46 and 49 number in voter turnout out of all 50 states. What that means is that out of all 50 states, Minnesota is ranked number 1 in voter turnout rate, and Texas has ranked between 46th and 49th, all the way at the bottom. So we're all Texans. We all want the best for our state, and we got to make sure that we set an example for the rest of the states. And instead of being recognized as one of the worst states with voter turnout rate, we can actually do something about that and become one of the highest voter turnout rates and set an example and set a precedent for the remainder of the states in the country. And for that, I want to challenge all of us to rewrite history. So I want to present to you with a couple of statistics that might change the way that Texas looks, the Texas government looks, its demographic looks. So let's take a look. By 2022, 1 in 3 Texas voters will be under 30. Since 2016, an estimated 600,000 young voters have registered to vote as of December 2019. And third, 70% of Texans under 30 are actually people of color. So let's take a look at these statistics. By 2022, 33% of voters will be under 30. So we all know, just because of electoral history, most of the people that vote in our election, they're typically more affluent, they're typically elders. So if you have a particular demographic that is very specific and can be easily pointed out, decide majority of the electoral decisions for the remainder of the population simply because the other demographics don't choose to vote, what that means is that that more prominent demographic will make all the decisions for us. So by 2022, 33% of Texas voters, if they all hypothetically go out to vote, 33% of Texas voters under 30, if they all hypothetically go on to vote, that would set a precedent and establish new ground rules for the prominent demographics that are currently voting for the rest of us. So if 33% if this particular demographic of 33% of voters go out to vote, they'll definitely be a part of rewriting history and making sure that the government that we elect is more representative and direct and has a more direct impact and consequence to those demographics that don't typically look like those that are already voting. Now, I want to highlight the third bullet point. 70% of Texans under 30 are people of color. When 70% of Texans under 30 are people of color, and you have a government that is not representative of this diversity, it's only because those 70% of Texans under 30 that are eligible to vote, they're not voting. And if they're not voting, those demographics that are currently in government will remain. So apart from the 33% of Texas voters that are under 30, 70% of Texans under 30 are people of color. And when you have about 600,000 young voters registered to vote as of December 2019, if you continue on this momentum, if you build up on this potential, you could potentially have an impact that will make a difference in the way that the government of Texas looks, in the way that the laws are made, in the way that Texas is known across the country, and in the way that the United States is becoming more representative of the diversity that will be seen not only in Texas, but in the entire United States of America for years to come, for decades to come. So with that, I want to challenge us to rewrite history. And the only way to do that is for us to get out and vote. So that leads me to my second part, important dates, vote 2020. So some key dates for the November 3rd election include these following. And if you can take some time to take a picture of this or write them down, and I'll definitely leave like 10 or 15 seconds at the end of my pitch to definitely give some time for that. So let's begin. So October 5th is the last day to register to vote in Texas. So unfortunately in Texas, if you're not aware yet, in Texas, you cannot register to vote the same day that you can vote like in some other states. In Texas, you have to register to vote at least a month in advance before you can actually cast your ballot. So if we look at the bottom point, November 3rd is official election day. So if you're not registered to vote by October 5th, and if you try to vote on November 3rd, you just simply can't because you won't be registered and you won't be on the catalog. So if you want to make sure that you're registered and that your vote is counted for on this important election, make sure to register to vote as soon as possible. And don't wait to the last minute either. And stick around or skip to the part where I'm actually speaking about how to register to vote to do that. So to the next point, October 23rd is the last day to apply for ballot by mail. So this is important because everyone I'm sure knows or has heard about, potential defundings or issues and delays going on with USPS. Now, to prevent that from having an effect in the way that you vote, if you choose to vote by October 3rd by mail, so if you wait all the way to this deadline, October 3rd, to apply to vote by mail, there is a very, very strong possibility that you might not be able to cast your vote on time. So if you want to prevent this issue from happening and from potentially disenfranchising yourself, make sure that you submit an application to vote by mail as soon as possible. Hopefully by the end of this presentation or by the end of this week, the weekend, doesn't matter. But as long as you don't wait until the last day, October 3rd, or even the last week, take care of it as soon as possible. And I'll give instructions and explain to you guys how to do that. So next dates, October 13th to the 30th is early voting period. This is important because the governor of Texas has actually expanded the early voting period because of COVID-19. So if you want to vote early and you don't want to wait until November 3rd to cast your ballot, you can definitely do that between October 13th and October 30th. And in the upcoming slides, I'll definitely talk about this a little bit more and give you specific dates and times that when you can do that. And lastly, November 3rd is election day. So election day is technically the last day that you can actually cast your ballot for this general election season. So it typically runs from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So you don't want to wait to the last minute. If you don't want to wait to the last minute, you can definitely vote early and prevent any misfortunes from happening and prevent yourself from being disenfranchised. Because this election season is very important, and you can definitely take care of this responsibly and make sure that the pandemic, that maybe issues with USPS or any other external factor does not affect your right to vote. So yeah, so I'll wait like maybe 5 to 10 seconds for you guys to take a picture or to write these down in case you haven't. Okay, great, we can continue. So registering to vote, this is my next part. Registering to vote is for those voters that are interested in voting but haven't registered to vote yet. Well, you're in luck because as of today, I'm filming this in September. So as of today, you're still eligible to vote. So please take care of this as soon as possible. So requirements include, you have to be an American citizen. You have to be a legal resident of Harris County, at least 18 years old on election day, not a convicted felon. You may be eligible to vote though if you have completed your sentence, probation, and parole, and have not been declared by a court exercising probate jurisdiction to be either totally mentally incapacitated or partially mentally incapacitated without the right to vote. So as long as you're an American citizen, legal resident of Harris County, and at least 18 years old on election day, you'll be eligible to register to vote. So this is how you do it. So registering to vote, you have a couple of options. I'm presenting you with a couple of options. First option is registering in person at county's voter registrar office. So if you go to your county's voter registrar office, which you can check out at hctax.net, you'll be able to simply pick out one of these forms. I'm showing you with my cursor. And essentially, if it's a new application, if it's a new application, you fill out new application and you fill this out with all your information. Shouldn't take honestly more than 2 minutes. You sign it, put a date on it, turn it in. Good job, you're registered to vote. Well, you submitted the application to register to vote. If you receive like a official registration in about 3 to 4 weeks. So that's option one. And if you want to find out the address of your local registrar, visit this website right here. Option number two, you can request a postage paid application from your voter registrar. Once received, fill the voter registration card and simply put it in your mailbox. So you can visit this website right here, votetexas.gov/register. And if you go to this website, you'll be able to actually request a postage paid application from your voter registrar. So what that means is that you'll get this form in the mail, and just like you would if you did option 1, you'll be able to fill this out. And once you fill it out, you simply fold it as instructed and put it in your mailbox, because and since it's already postage paid, all you have to do is put it in your mailbox and you're good to go. And just like I mentioned in option 1, you'll receive like an official notification and registration card, maybe 3 to 4 weeks after they receive this form. Option 3, you can fill out an online application, print it, and mail it to the voter registrar office. But the caveat is that you must stamp the envelope. So you can visit the website again, and in the website, it'll give you a particular location if you want to actually fill out the application online. So if you want to fill this form out online, you'll be more than welcome to do so. You're gonna have to print it, and once you print it, you have to put it in your own envelope, and you must buy a stamp, and then you mail it to the voter registrar office as instructed to do so. So the only difference between option 3 and option 2 is that for this one, you're really skipping the first part, which is requesting a postage paid application. You're just simply taking care of that in one swoop. But the only thing is that you just have to buy an envelope and put a stamp on it, and that way they can actually mail it out. Okay, and again, you just vote texas.gov/register and you'll be able to see it. Okay, so next, frequently asked questions. If I've registered in the past, do I have to register again? If all information is the same, you don't have to register again. How do I know if I'm already registered? You have to visit votetexas.gov, and again, I'm gonna show the next slide is gonna be dedicated towards this. What happens if I need to update my voter registration information? So you will have to update your info on a new voter card, which you can complete with any of the steps on the previous slide. I don't feel like voting. It's all the same anyway. Well, this one is not really a question, but it's a frequently given comment. So this is what I have to say about that. I can't force you to vote, you're right. But just know that the United States is one of the few countries in the world where a vote actually counts. So even though I can't force you to vote, just know that there are some democracies around the world that would like to have the legitimacy of the United States' electoral processes. So by voting, at least you know that you're actually having an impact on how your counties look like, how your districts look like, your city, your state, and your country. And if you don't vote, then sadly, just like the statistic that I mentioned in the beginning, it's just a particular demographic that's deciding those things for you. So these are the frequently asked questions. And just like I mentioned, I was gonna show like instructions on how to do a couple of the things that I mentioned. So you can use votetexas.gov to check registration. So once you go to this website, you'll be able to click, am I registered? Right here. So once you click, am I registered, you can select your criteria. So once you click, am I registered, you're gonna be prompted to this screen right here. And just for the, to standardize things, I'm going to pick, let's choose name, county, and date of birth. So we're gonna pick name, county, and date of birth. And once we click that, this is what's going to appear. So once you click name, county, and date of birth, you're going to be prompted to this page right here where you put your first name, last name, your county, date of birth, and zip code. And once you do that, for privacy reasons, I didn't include my own, but once you click that, you essentially put your information, and if you register to vote, you're actually able to, if you register to vote, you'll receive an automatic notification that confirms your registration, and it would have all your information. And just double check that, and if it's correct, then you're good to go. And you could just go vote, go to the polls, take your ID, and you'll be all good to go. Alrighty. All right, so let's go to the next part of my presentation. What will be on the ballot? So everyone knows that for this upcoming election, probably arguably the biggest and the most famous campaign race that we're following is essentially to figure out who is going to be living and working from this beautiful White House for the upcoming 4 years. However, the presidential elections are not the only elections on our ballot in 2020. Keep in mind that 2020, even though the official name for it can be the 2020 presidential elections, it's also the 2020 general elections. So they're going to be general positions for us to vote on, apart from the president. If you haven't voted before, you're definitely going to be able to see that. Now, just a couple. There's going to be United States Senate, United States House of Representatives, and for us Texans, it's going to be senators of the state. It's going to be representatives of the state. And just to continue to name a few, is we mentioned the president, and we mentioned the U.S. senator, the U.S. representative, and a statewide race level. For us in Houston, we're going to be able to vote for railroad commissioner. For district races, depending on your district, you're going to be able to vote for your state board of education members. And just like I mentioned before, your state senator, also your state representative, they're your district races, they're your state level races. And you're also going to be able to vote for your district attorney, which is a county-wide election. And just a disclaimer, for presentation purposes, I did not include all positions on the ballot. A comprehensive list of candidates can be found at votetexas.gov. Note, for detailed descriptions of candidates, visit the leagueofwomensvoters.org, lwv.org, closer to election date. So the leagueofwomenvoter.org, they typically release information, detailed descriptions of the candidates in a nonpartisan way to essentially just help out the community and just inform the community more about the things that they're voting for and the people that they're voting to get those things done. So closer to election day, I believe if you click on this link, lwv.org right now, you probably won't be able to see much information on that. But in the future, closer to election day, you'll definitely be able to see more information on the candidates. Perfect. So what if I need language assistance to vote? So let's say that you maybe if you're watching this video, this might not pertain to you, but let's say you have a friend or you know someone, a coworker or something like that, that needs language assistance. Essentially, they don't speak English proficiently enough to actually read the ballot, go on their own, and actually participate in our democracy in a way that is not too straining for them. So by Texas law, polling sites are actually required to offer multilingual ballots depending on the magnitude of any language in the district. So what this means, Spanish, Mandarin Chinese, and Vietnamese, because they are common languages in our communities, in Harris County particularly, most polling sites, if I'm not mistaken, will have multilingual ballots in these languages, in Spanish, Mandarin, Chinese, and Vietnamese, simply because this law that I just mentioned dictates that polling sites have to have multilingual ballots in the languages most commonly spoken by the community, apart from English. Now, let's say that for whatever reason, if the polling site cannot offer assistance in the voter's language, so maybe they don't have multilingual ballots or they don't have multilingual speakers, voters are actually allowed to receive language assistance from anyone other than their employer or agent of any labor union. So what this means is that, let's say, again, maybe if it doesn't apply to yourself, maybe let's say you have a friend or you have or like a distant cousin or just someone that you know. Maybe, you know, they don't speak English, but let's say they have a son or they have a friend that does. So they're actually able to take their son or their friend that speaks English to serve as their interpreter, as their official interpreter. By Texas law, they will not be negated this opportunity, because at the end of the day, the United States is a multilingual and multicultural country, and to kind of make out for that, Texas by law, they're guaranteeing everybody the right to take a language assistance person with them at the polls. So these interpreters are able to read the ballot to the voter, speak to election workers on their voters' behalf, and to essentially make sure that their entire process is as smooth and as legitimate as possible. So this is the slide on language assistance. And again, if it doesn't apply to you, please pass along this information to someone that might. Okay, so let's get to voting by mail. So voting by mail is a little bit more complicated because voting by mail is not an option, not a voting option open to the entire demographic, at least in Texas. You have to qualify to vote by mail, and you qualify to vote by mail if you are 65 years or older by election day, if you will be out of the country during early voting and election day, if you are confined in jail but otherwise eligible, if you have a disability, more information on the next slide. But essentially, if you want to qualify to vote by mail, you essentially need to fit into any of these categories. Now, about the disability, what qualifies as having a disability, and what about COVID-19? So let's say let's say you want to vote by mail, and you're not 65 years old or older, and you will not be out of the county, or you're not confined in jail, but you still want to vote by mail. So the only option you have left, potentially, is to qualify by having a disability. And let's take a look at how COVID-19 and the factors of COVID-19 could factor into you potentially being able to vote by mail. So under Texas law, you qualify as having a disability if you are sick, pregnant, or if you're voting in person, or if voting in person will pose a health risk to you. So the Texas Supreme Court ruled that lack of immunity of COVID-19 can actually be considered as a factor when requesting a mail ballot. However, an individual must have an existing illness or physical condition to qualify as disabled in light of COVID-19. Note, in other words, it is up to the voter's discretion to declare themselves disabled when requesting a mail-in ballot in fear of a lack of immunity to COVID-19 because of an existing condition. So essentially what this means is, so let's say you want to qualify for the disability to vote by mail. However, and you want to factor COVID-19 into this. So let's say you have a disability, a pre-existing disability or pre-existing illness like diabetes or cancer. If you have a pre-existing illness like diabetes and cancer, and you're afraid of potentially contracting COVID-19 because you're already immunocompromised, you can count that as actually, you can actually count that as having a disability, and you're therefore eligible to request a mail-in ballot. However, it is at your discretion. You know, if you ask a friend or anything like that, like, you know, at the end of the day, you're the one that's filling out the form. So you have, you're ultimately making the decision, and because the Texas Supreme Court made a rule that is some way more ambiguous, you know, if you just fill out disability, that's all you have to do. But at the end of the day, if you are afraid of potentially contracting COVID-19 and potentially having negative impacts on your health because of that, you have the right to request this mail-in ballot, and you have the right to actually apply as actually being disabled because of having a pre-existing illness and potentially contracting COVID-19. Perfect. So now if you qualified to vote by mail, this is the actual process as to actually do that. Okay, now let's vote by mail. So first and foremost, what you have to do is you have to apply. So go to your county elections website to request or print an application. So, you know, the famous website that we've been using throughout the entire presentation, votetexas.gov. You fill out, sign, and mail to your election administrator in the county where you are registered to vote. And the application, you have to make sure the application is received, not postmarked by October 23rd, 2020 for the general election. So essentially, you go to the same website that I demonstrated in the little demo. You scroll down and you click on voting by mail and requesting that. You're going to be prompted to the application process, which shouldn't take that long. And once you do that, you're going to be able to receive your mail-in ballot if you qualify. The second step is to confirm your application was received. Call your county office 7 to 10 days after you sent in your application. Voters will receive ballot 30 days before election, in around early October, or 7 days after the office received an application. You have to make sure that it's filled out with a black or blue ink, and that you sign with a similar signature as application. That way, you know, just to avoid any type of issues as a result. So basically, once you apply, after 7 to 10 days, give your county office a call and be like, hey, have you guys received my application? Just to make sure that everyone's on the right track and that nothing has happened to your application. So lastly, once you receive your ballot, you fill it out, as mentioned, and you submit it. So the way you submit it is you can simply mail your ballot back to the county. Ballot must arrive by election day. So again, this process is essentially dependent on time. Once you receive it, you fill out your ballot as soon as possible and you mail it back. Or a second option to submit it is you can submit your ballot in person to a designated drop-off county location, and the voter must present appropriate voter ID to turn in marked ballot. So the second option is if you want to make sure that your ballot is actually not accidentally not counted for, you can actually request to have the mail-in ballot. You can fill it out in your home. And once you seal it, you can actually go in person to a designated drop-off location and submit it. That way you can make sure that your mail-in ballot is counted for. That's the second option. So as long as you do either one, you should be good to go. And again, this is very time sensitive. So as long as you do it ahead of time, you'll be good to go for the entire process. Perfect. Now, so let's get to one of the interesting things that's going to be occurring for our election season here in Harris County specifically. So we're going to have the introduction of drive-through voting. So some polling locations across Harris County will institute a new method of voting called drive-through voting. Any voter is able to cast their ballot from the comfort of their cars if they choose to. Note, only limited locations will offer this new voting method. So more information will be distributed as election day approaches. So be on the lookout for maybe the Harris County website, votetexas.gov, or social media and campaigning websites to be most informed when things get more released. And just to demonstrate what it's going to look like, here's a quick video released by the Harris County Clerk on. Alrighty, so that was a brief introduction of and just a visual presentation of what drive-through voting is going to look like. And it's really just as simple as it seems. The Harris County Clerk and the Harris County Voter Registrar Office have been working really hard to essentially provide a new alternative and innovative way to try to get voters to actually vote in light of COVID-19 particularly. So just as the video shows, you're going to be prompted to essentially one of the limited polling locations that have this opportunity to vote from your car. And just like it says, it's just you form a line and you go to one of the employees and you simply vote. And once you do that, you'll be able to go on your way. So it's almost like, going to instead of going to like a McDonald's or Jack in the Box drive-thru, you simply voting. And it should be pretty interesting. It's the first time that Harris County does it, again, in light of COVID-19. Now let's get to the second. So curbside voting. So curbside voting has actually been around for a while. It's not anything new, but I put them on the same slides together because I actually want to create a distinction and highlight the distinctions before anyone gets confused when they see it on their social media or something. So curbside voting is actually different than drive-through voting. Curbside voting is for voters that are physically unable to enter the polling location for any given reason. A voter rings the curbside voting buzzer, and a polling worker will bring the voting equipment and ballot to the voter. So curbside voting is available at every location, but is only for particular demographics. So if we remember, drive-through voting was open it's only going to be in limited locations, but it's open for the general public. However, curbside voting is available at every location, but is only for the demographic that is physically unable to enter to the polling location. So the way that it's going to work is just like I mentioned, is at every single location, there's going to be a little buzzer that where if you're handicapped or if you, or for whatever reason, if you just can't enter the polling location, then by Texas law, you're given the right to essentially request someone to bring out the electoral equipment to you. And once you safely vote, they'll be on their way, and you can be on your way as well. So that's the biggest difference. Drive-through voting, it's new, it's innovative. It's the first time that Harris County is going to be introducing this in light of COVID-19. Curbside voting has been existing for a while. The only thing is that it's for a particular demographic. However, it's available in all locations. Whereas drive-through voting it's open for everybody, but it's only in limited locations. Okay, so early voting information. So if you remember, November 3rd is not the only time that you can actually cast your vote. Harris County's goal is to have 112 early voting locations, which include 8 locations with drive-through voting. Registered voters in Harris County can choose to vote during early voting period at any of the Harris County early voting sites. So from October 13th to the 30th, please feel free to take a picture to see the different dates and their different times. So from October 13th to the 30th, you're going to be able to actually go to several of the early voting locations and cast your ballot way before November 3rd if you want. And this is actually just to ensure that because early voting has always existed as well, and the governor of Texas actually expanded early voting period because of COVID-19. So this is just to ensure that people, maybe November 3rd is a busy schedule, maybe people just simply can't miss work, then there's no, so then there's a bunch of alternatives and several other days that people can actually go vote. So again, these are the different times. Generally, they're run from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. There's some days where they start at 12. They might end at 10. But the idea is to essentially provide you with the ability to essentially fit any of these dates into your schedule and vote. And essentially make sure that your right to vote is not negated simply because of other commitments. Alrighty. So this is my last slide, and I want to dedicate this one to election day reminders. So November 3rd is the last day to cast your ballot for this general election season. During the November 3rd election, voters in Harris County will be able to cast their vote at any polling location. Harris County will have 800 polling locations and 8 drive-through locations. And voters will be able to check wait times, polling locations at harrisvotes.com/wait times. So let's say that let's say it's November 3rd and you really want to make sure that you cast your, let's say it's November 3rd, it's 5 p.m. and you want to make sure that you get there on time and you have enough time to vote. Generally they won't close until, around like 7 p.m. But either way, you just want to make sure. So you can actually go to harrisvotes.com/wait times. Make sure, and they're going to highlight which polling location has the least amount of voters. And you can simply navigate your way around any polling location and simply vote at any of the locations that seem, most convenient for you in terms of time. So another reminder is to take any acceptable form of photo ID, driver's license, passport, state ID, etc. If you encounter any issues with voting, you can call the Protect the Vote hotline. So I included the English number, but again, if you have any friends that might speak Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Bengali, Hindi, Urdu, and Tagalog, you can actually share these numbers. And essentially what Protect the Vote does is, for whatever reason, some polling locations, maybe like an election worker is confused and, maybe you're just receiving a hard time in one of the polling sites or something like that. Protect the Vote is actually it's actually an organization that helps out, and they have a hotline and they can essentially provide steps for whatever issue when it comes to voting. And they worked around during primaries in July and earlier, and they're going to be working around for the November elections as well. So again, these are the support systems and the reminders to essentially make sure that you have a good and happy voting period. So for that, I just want to say thank you for sticking around and for the presentation. And again, if you don't mind sharing this presentation, you might never know who this could help out. There might be a new voter in 2020 elections, or simply, there's going to be new ways for them to get information. So thank you so much once more. And please revert back to this video if you have any more questions.